When we study the Bible, we're time travelers. We are time travelers going to a far and distant country, to a culture that's not our own. And when you travel, you can be an obnoxious tourist. You can go to other cultures and go, oh, that's so gross that they eat that. Or, oh, why did they dress that way? Or, ooh, this. And you can, sneer at other cultures. Or you can, have some humility and come with being inquisitive, being curious, asking questions, trying to understand. And today we are eavesdropping on an ancient conversation between the Apostle Peter, a Jewish Israeli man from the Middle East, to a church in modern-day Turkey. Back then it was called Asia Minor in the Roman Empire. And he's writing to Christians who are suffering. Some of them are going to be just excluded, mocked, ridiculed. In some extreme cases, they're actually going to be tortured and imprisoned and executed. And he's writing to churches that are predominantly made up of poor people, slaves, and women. All the records show us that the early church, the people who flocked to Jesus, were predominantly poor people. They're predominantly slaves. They're predominantly women. There are exceptions to that. There were wealthy people who came to Christ more and more over time. But the early church was mainly composed of those groups. Now, I kind of fancy myself a tour guide. That's what I feel like I'm doing a lot of times. I'm like a tour guide, taking you on a tour through the Bible and historic Christianity. And a tour guide can speak the language of the place that he's visiting, right, or the place that he's touring, but he can also speak the language of his guests. And I realize that today I'm speaking in 2025 in one of the most progressive cities in America. And the cry for women's rights isn't a faint cry. It's not a whisper. It is a ferocious roar. It's a ferocious roar. It's a desire. It's a demand. And not long ago in this country, women were demeaned. They were. I think maybe the music in the lobby needs to be turned off. I got the bad ADD, guys. I'm sorry about that. But maybe somebody can take care of that. I don't know. But anyways, not too long ago in our nation, people demeaned women. They said, they're not intelligent enough. They're too emotional to be things like Supreme Court justices or to really be high up in companies. But now, across the spectrum, women just crush it. They crush it in pretty much every imaginable, conceivable scenario except for being frontline men. That's the one area where maybe they don't crush it. But in every other area conceivable, women absolutely just crush it. But there's still a major pay gap. That's a huge issue that people are concerned about. And I want to be sensitive speaking in these issues because I want to recognize that not only is this an issue of the past where women were demeaned or excluded or alienated and left out, but I also want to speak with sensitivity because I realize there might even be women in the room who've been victims of violence, who've been victims of abuse of one form or another. And just out of the gate, I want to say here at Counterculture, we say that abuse is never okay, that violence or sexual abuse or even emotional abuse towards women is always wrong, that it's against the heart of God, and that if you are in a situation like that as a woman, there are resources available to you. There are people who care. Getting out of that kind of situation, it's not easy, it's complicated, it's difficult, but we want to stand with you. Amazingly, I think just by the providence of God, the head of Safety Compass, who we support, texted me and said she's here today. And they help women who've been the victims of human trafficking and violence and abuse here in Oregon. So I just want you to know that we care about you. God cares about you. God sees you. We're on your side. And I just want to condemn in the clearest possible terms abuse of any kind. But I also want to tell you this. The New Testament was written by oppressed people to oppressed people about an oppressed person. You realize that? I mean, it's called the crucifixion. It's pretty bad, It's pretty tough, what he went through and everything. And it was written, by oppressed people to oppressed people about an oppressed person. Peter experienced torture, incarceration. He was executed in Rome, crucified upside down. The slaves and women that he's writing to would be victims of abuse and violence. And we worship a Messiah who suffered and was killed. Christianity has this unique and astonishing claim that we can never grow numb to. It's easy in our culture. There's crosses on buildings. There's crosses on necklaces. We get numb to it, but we can never get numb to it. Christianity has this unique and astonishing claim that God knows what it's like to be humiliated. That God knows what it's like to suffer. God knows what it's like to be tortured. Now, my desire is to show you not only is this passage intelligible, not only is it understandable, not only is it tolerable, but I have the audacious goal of showing you that this passage is actually beautiful. That's my intent. And, reading a passage like this in downtown Portland is kind of like that scene from The Poltergeist, where they open the closet and all these spirits and ghosts go flying everywhere. The person gets launched across the room, and then the closet can suck the whole house down into it. That's what this passage is a little bit like. But there's a whole host of questions that emerge, right? There's questions about gender. There's questions about sexuality. There's questions about women's rights. There's questions about abuse and more. And I realize that these are deeply personal and sensitive topics to some of those sitting in the room. And so I just want to acknowledge that. But I also want to say that my scope is going to be limited today. Okay, my scope is going to be narrow. There's no way to address all of those things. That's impossible. We're going to be limited and narrow in our focus. And I'm really going to show you three things. So some horrors from history, some beauty from theology, and then wisdom for right now. Here we go. Horrors from history. So verse 1, wives, in the same way, submit yourselves to your own husbands. And notice he doesn't say all men. He says to your own husbands. Women don't need to submit to all men. The Bible doesn't say that. There are cultures like that in the world. But if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives. So we call this series Liquid Gold, because this is a suffering church, right? Wisdom from the fire. And the truth is, women in the Roman Empire had been in the fire for a very long time. And we've kind of been laying this foundation that Peter's using the metaphor of Babylon. If you read the book of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we keep talking about that, foreigners, exiles. Babylon uses this metaphor of beasts for these violent, prideful, oppressive empires. Beasts. And this is the beast of the Roman Empire. I titled today's message, Beauty and the Beast. Beauty and the Beast is what I titled this message today. But women in Rome had been in the fire for a long time because the ancient world was rife with abortion and infanticide. Now, infanticide is when you have a baby that you don't want, and the Greeks and the Romans would leave the babies in dumpsters and in garbage dumps and in the sides of hills, and it was perfectly normal. Aristotle commanded them to throw out babies with disabilities. So there's exposure, infant exposure, infanticide. And in a letter to Hilarion, we see the attitude in Rome. This Roman soldier named Hilarion writes a letter, and he's writing this nice letter to his wife. It's pretty actually a nice letter. And then he goes, if it's a male child, keep it, but if it's a female, throw it out. He just leaves that as a common thing. They would throw out female babies because they wanted heirs. This still happens in China. There are 33 million more men in China than there are women. Want to know why? Because in our lifetime, they practice sex-selective abortion, where the Chinese families want to abort the baby. They don't want females. They don't want more and more mouth to feed. They want boys. So it still happens in China today. In Rome, there was something going on. These are horrors from history, right? And horrors from today, I guess. There's the law of the manus, and that's that a Roman wife wasn't allowed to eat with her husband's guests. So he's got his buddies over, his friends over. The wife's not even allowed to come and eat at the same table. She's got to go eat in a different room. In the law of the manus, they were often, and there are exceptions to this, but by and large, Roman women weren't allowed to leave the house without a chaperone. There's always somebody watching. Your husband's always got eyes on you. The law of Manus placed her under absolute control of her husband. He had ownership of all her possessions. He could divorce her, but she could not divorce him. And I just want to say, I wouldn't have fared well back in the Roman Empire. I always tell Becca, if you leave, I'm going with you. Like, I just would not be okay. You know, we got married so young. Like, I don't know how to be a functioning adult without her, okay? Like, if she left, I would somehow run out of all my money and spend all of it and starve to death. I would somehow do it at the same time. I just don't even know what I'd do without her. But let me just say, Becca, she'd be fine. Like, she'd be great. Like, she's like a force to be reckoned with. I know she's small, but there's like power densely packed, all right? But man, the Roman Empire, it really was pretty gnarly, all right? Because there was something called Patria Potestas, which was in the 12 tablets of Rome's founding. And it was kind of like a tradition, but Patria Potestas means the power of the patriarch. And a Roman dad could execute his children without a trial. He could just kill his own kids, like no problem. He'd probably have one of his servants do it. He could do that. And those rights extended to the wife more and more. Caesar Augustus ratified into law that he could kill his wife if he thought she was having adultery without a trial. He could execute his wife. For other things, you'd have to get a tribunal of family members, which isn't great, but it's just gnarly. It's crazy stuff. And I want to show you why Peter's writing to her. Because if you read this passage, you go, why doesn't Peter tell him to run away? Why doesn't Peter tell him to liberate themselves? Why doesn't Peter tell these why? Well, maybe he didn't want him to get killed. That's why Peter writes the way he writes. Check this out. This is the situation they were up against. The beast of Roman hierarchy. So at the top, you got Caesar Nero, the emperor, who is a god. He's worshipped as God. And then you got the pagan gods like Jupiter and Mars and whatnot. Then you have below them the patricians. And that's like the Senate. That's the elite. Those are the guys who are the 1%. They live on Wall Street. Like, these are the equestrians. Then down below that, you got the plebeians. And this is a wonderful put down to use against people. You plebeian. It's hilarious. But the plebeian, that actually is like, if you read things, they say that sometimes. But the plebeians were the working class. Like, they were citizens. They had their Roman citizenship, which was a big deal, but they were the working class. They weren't very wealthy. Then below that, you had freemen. And maybe that's like conquered people like Paul of Tarsus. Oh, actually, I think Paul got his citizenship, which is crazy. So forgive me for that misstep. But a free person is someone who's not a slave, but they're not a citizen, okay? So that's even like lower in the totem pole. One who's right near the bottom, women and children. Women and children are right above slaves. They're right above enslaved people. Women and children are at the very, very bottom. So Peter's writing, where's the people that he's writing to? Christian wives. And what power structure is above them? So it's like, women, liberate yourself. You're free in Christ. Be free. It's like dead. So Peter, he's writing very thoughtfully, very intentionally under Patria Potestas, where a husband can execute his wife just by accusing her of adultery. And that's what he's writing to. And what's even crazier is this. Plutarch, and I got this from this wonderful Asian American theologian named Janelle O'Kay, but Plutarch said, a married woman should therefore worship and recognize the gods whom her husband holds dear. You get this? And these alone. The door must be closed to all other religions, to all strange and foreign superstitions. So Plutarch says, you can't have a Christian wife. You can't be a Christian wife. They're already we say resist, right? They're already resisting. They're rebelling in the fact that they have a faith that their husband doesn't have. Plutarch says a wife can never have her own faith. She must listen to the patriarch's faith. And you want to see the civil disobedience in this text, to use a modern term? Look at verse 6. Do not give in to fear. I think I'm just going to even cut that sentence short. Don't give in. And he had said in verse 2 and verse 1 that the goal is that a wife, through her conduct, could get her Roman husband to become a Christian. How do you think Plutarch would feel about that? That is audacious. That is radical, that the thought that she could convert her pagan husband. It's astonishing, but I love this. Don't give in. Don't give in to fear. He's going to want you to go back to worshiping Jupiter. He's going to want you to worship Nero. Don't give in. Don't give in to fear. That's pretty radical. I want to pause for a second and talk to people in the modern era. Maybe you're here. Well, say one thing. The Bible does say don't intentionally get married to a non-Christian. And at a later date in January, I'm going to do a series on relationships, and I'll elaborate more on that. But the Bible says don't marry a non-Christian. But if you find yourself in a situation, and this happens through no fault of your own, where your husband walks away from the faith, or maybe you got married when you were non-Christians, and you're married to a non-Christian, that's who Peter's writing to. And I just want you to know that God sees you. Some of the most godly women I've ever known in my life, some of the most Christ-like women I have ever met in my life are women who decided to stay married to their husband who wasn't a Christian. And they're just stunning, stunning saints that I know. And I've known a couple women like that. And I just want you to know God sees you. He sees your patience. He sees what you're going through. And I think that's beautiful and amazing. I think I already gave the caveat. If you're being abused, get the heck out of there. If you're being physically abused, violently abused, you have the right to divorce your husband biblically. But if you're staying married just to somebody who's non-Christian, he's not a bad guy, he's just a non-Christian, God sees you. That's beautiful. That is wonderful. And I just want to affirm that. But I also want to read you this quote from Sarah Stonebreaker. Okay, what a cool last name. What a baddie this lady is. Sarah Stonebreaker. Okay, but she's a scholar who teaches at Oxford. She got a PhD from Cambridge. She also teaches in Australia. But she says, my students love the idea of human rights. They're passionate about our need to defend these rights. Yet they know virtually nothing about where human rights came from historically. Human rights emerged from the belief in the inherent, precious, and equal value of human life found in the Bible. So what she's saying is the reason why we think patreo potestas is reprehensible is because of the influence of Christianity. The reason why we look at the Roman Empire, we go, that is horrifying. Or we look at what I said about China, we go, where they actually are still fighting for human rights in China, by the way. Why do we look at that and go, that is horrifying? Because of the influence of Christianity. You go, that can't be true. I'll prove it to you that it's true. All these secular people, where do they want to go on vacation? They want to go to Europe. Why do they want to go to Europe? Because there's beautiful things that Christians built. And they want to go there. I don't believe in God, but I love all these beautiful things that people who did made, Well, guess what? Christianity didn't just give us beautiful churches you look at on your vacation. Christianity also gave us human rights. And I could give you about 50 quotes from a whole variety of sources that agree with Sarah Stonebreaker. But then she goes on and she says, some appalling abuses have been committed in the name of Christianity, sadly, but it is also true that Christian belief in the inherent dignity and equal value of all human life enables human rights. So I always want to acknowledge there have been women who've been abused with these Bible verses in hand. And that is horrible. By men who claim to represent God, claim to know God, and that is evil, and that is wicked, and that is inexcusable, and it has happened far too often for far too long. But at the same time, I want to tell you that Jesus was abused by people who claim to represent God. Jesus was executed by who? The chief priests and the Sanhedrin. Religious people who claim to represent God are the very ones who murdered Jesus. So don't reject Jesus because of what those clowns have done throughout history. Jesus always protected women. Not a single time in the Gospels does Jesus speak a derogatory word to women. At every level, he's elevating them. He's always gentle. He's always, even the one time where you think he's saying something negative, he's actually saying something sideways at his disciples, and he's elevating women. He is always defending them, and any church that really follows Jesus will do the same. All right, so horrors from history. Next thing is beauty from theology. There's something in psychology called black and white thinking. If you've been to therapy, maybe you've heard of this. Polarized thinking. It's a cognitive distortion where you think either something's all bad, they hate me, they don't think I'm any good, or you swing to the opposite extreme. And it's easy to think in these polarized things. And what I want to say is, just because Roman culture and other abusive male-dominant cultures are horribly wrong, doesn't mean that our culture is entirely right. Polarized thinking. Well, they're wrong, so we got to go all the way over here. I want you to take a little trip with me, okay? Take a trip with me, and as you take this trip, I want you to think about day and night. I want you to think about water and land, and I want you to think about earth and sky. Okay, so when you go on a camping trip, where do you want to go? You want to go to the Oregon coast. You want to go to Crater Lake. I want to go to Timothy or, Lost Lake. I want to go to these beautiful rivers and go fly fishing. If you get to go on a bigger trip, where do you want to go? You want to go to the beach, Huntington Beach. You want to, where's the most expensive property? It's over in Cape Cod where the Kennedys vacation. You want to go to Venice. Why am I saying all this? Because where do we love to go? We love to go to places where water touches land. What's the most beautiful time of day? When do people get out of their cars? I've actually seen them do this. Get out of their cars and pull over on the side of the road to take photos. When do people they're just mind blown? When do photographers say is golden hour? Where if they're going to do a photo shoot, when do they do it? They do it at sunrise and sunset. When day touches night, when night and day unite. Where do people often want to go to get a view like Drake? To get the views, where do they want to go? They want to go to a high rise. They want to go to the top of a mountain. They want to reach the summit. I like to go to rooftop bars. That's what Rebecca and I say. When we go on vacation, we say rooftops, coffee shops. That's where we want to be, Where do people want to live in the penthouse? Nobody wants to live in the basement, right? You start rolling in the Benjamins, you want to be in the penthouse. Where do people want to be? They want to be where heaven touches earth, where the sky meets the land. People want to live where day unites with night. They want to go where water unites with dry earth. And they want to go where the sky touches the land. And that's how the book of Genesis starts. It starts in all those ways, those two where there's union between difference. So we have day and night, we have earth and sky, we have water and land. All right, that's how the book of Genesis starts, but there's a fourth one, and that's male and female. Male and female. It starts with 4 different pairs where there's union across diversity. And all of those things are meant to be a picture of God uniting with his people. The most beautiful thing is when day unites with night. It's called sunset. The most beautiful place is where water unites with land. It's called vacation. It's called Huntington Beach. The most beautiful view is where heaven touches earth. And that's what the Bible is saying about male and female. Now, we live in a time that claims essentially that men and women are swappable, that they're interchangeable, that they're identical. That's essentially what our city believes, that men and women are just swappable, they're just swap them out, they're interchangeable, they're identical, and acknowledging that there's any difference between male and female is a threat to equality. Okay, that's what our culture teaches us. But the Bible says that there's actually something beautiful about union across difference. That's what the Bible is saying in the book of Genesis, and that's where Peter and Paul's assumptions are just flowing from this fact. But Anne Moore is a geneticist and a neuropsychologist at Oxford University, and she says some words that maybe Portland won't like, but I'm going to say them. Men are different from women. To maintain that they are exactly the same is to build a society based on a biological and scientific lie. We differ in every cell of our bodies. A woman's metabolism is slower. We have different skeletal structures. Men have greater bone density. A woman's organs are larger. They have a larger stomach, larger kidneys, larger liver and appendix, but they have smaller lungs and smaller lung capacity. Men have more muscle mass. Men have more blood cells and have a greater oxygen capacity. And if you don't like any of this, you disagree with any of this, I have a very troubling and horrible fact to present to you, but it kind of just seals the deal. I'll prove to you that men and women aren't identical. 95% of domestic violence is perpetrated by men. And that is evil, but it's also the fact that men are just bigger and stronger and more aggressive. Just a scientific fact, and you really can't argue with that, and I think we all know that deep down. So, union across difference, but I want to show you verse 7 in the New Living Translation because I think it's really helpful. So that word weaker, I think is just alluded. Vessel, that's always talking about the body in the New Testament. Vessel, yeah, men are physically bigger and stronger and more aggressive. That's just a fact of science. In the same way, you husbands must give honor. That is a really important word. Note that word honor. Treat your wife with understanding as you live together. She may be weaker than you, but she is your equal partner in God's gift of new life. Treat her as you should, so your prayers will not be hindered. That last verse saying, hey, if you treat your wife bad, God's not going to listen to your prayers. God won't hear your prayers if you treat your wife bad. Man, Peter's not messing around here. This is a check on men's power. And I want to just speak to married couples and men in particular, if you're married here for a second, because there are men, I'm not wired this way, but there are men who are like, why would I need to tell my wife I love her again? I told her I loved her when I first met her. I told her I loved her. I told her she's beautiful, whatever, on our first date. Why would I need to tell her she's beautiful every day? Yeah, that is insane. Like, honor your wife. Show honor. And you don't have the same policy when it comes to the Timbers or the Blazers. I notice you cheer every game. I notice you cheer every time they score. Maybe you should do the same thing with your wife. Like, honor your wife. John Gottman and his wife, Julie Gottman, they say that in a good marriage, there should be a 5-to-1 ratio of grateful, loving, affirming, building up things that you'd say versus critical, complaining, derogatory things. And that they say they can predict a divorce with a 90% of accuracy, but they say a good marriage has like a 5-to-1 ratio of positivity. And I was actually reading that when you ratchet that up to like affection and smiles and pats on the back and hand holding and kisses and whatever else, it should actually be a 20-to-1 ratio. 20-to-1. And so Beck and I, we've been married all the time. And, I don't know why I said that. Sorry about that. I told you, she's preaching next week. Just come back then. But she'll do better. But anyways, we've been married 15 years, and we try to say positive things to each other all the time. That's what I was saying. We have a 5-to-1 ratio we try to live by. Just like encouragement, thanks, gratitude, not just complaining and nitpicking and whatever else. Yeah. So that's something, for your marriages today. But something from history I want to give is that in the Roman Empire, they're in a shame and honor culture. And for him to say, honor your wives as partners in the grace of life, as co-heirs in the grace of life, he's saying treat them as equals. In a shame and honor culture, they had the cursus honorum, where just to rise from plebeian to the top of the patrician class, you went through the cursus honorum. They were obsessed with honor. And Peter's saying, hey, show honor to your wives, you Christian men. honor them, treat them as equals. It's so stunning. But a lot of times honor is with your words. Yes, sir, right? In the military, you say, yes, sir. Honor your wife with your words. Tell her she's beautiful. Some of you wives, you literally need to leave today and tell your wife she's beautiful. Like, that's your homework, Do it. Honor her. Tell her you love her. Tell her she's talented. Tell her she's all kinds of stuff. Tell her how much she means to you. But men and women are different. That's what we're getting from theology. In that when there is union across difference, it's beautiful. It's a symbol of Christ and the church. Union across difference, it's like a sunset when night touches day. All right, next thought is wisdom for right now. So we've had horrors from history, beauty from theology, now we have wisdom for right now. I want to show you what Paul says. So we've been reading Peter's letter. We're going to check out a couple of Paul's letters. Check this out. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. He's writing that in Patreo Potestas times. He's writing that under the law of Manus. Do not be harsh with your wives. And he if you think that's amazing, look how much, I think I screwed up that reference. Sorry about that. It's supposed to be 5:25. But Ephesians 5:25 says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. When I proposed to Becca, the night that I proposed to her after she said yes, the first thing I did was I washed her feet. Not because I'm like a creep and I have foot fetish, but I washed her feet because Jesus, in their culture, slaves would wash people's feet. Jesus washed his disciples' feet. They wore sandals. So I washed her feet, and that's a symbolic gesture. But you're like, oh, Jesse, you're so cool. Well, I don't know. Because it's a lot harder to do that like 14 years in, 12 years in, 13 years in. You come home from work, you're tired, I'm tired, and my wife wants to talk, or maybe if she wants to spend time with me, she wants me to pay attention to her. And it's like, I just want to go into a dark room and I want to watch men do violent things to each other alone in the dark. It could be on a field, could be on a court, could be Mortal Kombat, could be Liam Neeson. I just want to be in the dark alone watching violence, all right? I don't know why. Us men, we just need these things, okay? I definitely don't want to do the dishes. I definitely don't want to put the kids to bed, but that's when Ephesians comes in. That's where you should memorize Ephesians, because that's when you do the violent thing to yourself. You die to yourself, and you say, you know what, I'm going to serve her the way Christ served me. I'm going to serve her not because I feel like it, not because she earned it, not because she deserves it. I'm going to serve her by grace, the way Jesus served us by grace. That's the biblical view. And now there's some churches, they really lay down the law. Men are the head. Men should be first. Men ought to be first. They're the head of the household. I totally agree. Husbands should be first. Husbands should be first. Husbands should be first to apologize. Husbands should be first to forgive. Husbands should be first to say they're sorry. Husbands should be first to serve. Husbands should be first to sacrifice. I totally agree, because that's what Jesus-style leadership looks like. Jesus-style leadership looks like laying down your life. Now, a question that could be in your head is like, well, why does the husband get to represent Christ? Well, Rebecca McLaughlin from Cambridge, she had a great point. She goes, how much more abusive would it be if the husband said, I'm not going to do anything for you till you die for me? Yeah, that'd be a problem. I think this arrangement's actually much more liberating. The husband's supposed to die, and the wife is in response supposed to support him. I think that's pretty good. That's a good deal. Yeah. Paul is saying something radical under Patreo Potestas. He's saying, husbands, don't kill your wife. Die for your wife. Radical. It's amazing. Now we're going to look at the word, probably the most difficult word in this passage is the word submit. Let's go back to verse 1. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the beautiful behavior of their wives. My friend, one of my best friends, Josh Butler, he had a brilliant insight on this concept. Because the Bible actually says all Christians are to submit to one another, and wives are supposed to submit to their husbands. Like, I think that applies today. But the Bible tells all Christians to submit to one another. And when we think of submit, we think of somebody putting somebody in a headlock, right? We think of like, submit, that's what we think of. We think of roll over. We think of lay down, tap out. We think of submit as giving in and giving up. That's what we think of when we hear the word submit. But that's not the only use of submit in our culture. And I think one gets a lot closer, because how could everybody lay down and die if we're all supposed to submit to one another? There's another use of the word submit in our culture, and that's that to submit a paper, to submit a piece of artwork, to submit a film for the consideration of the academy, to submit. You see, the biblical idea of submit that's in this passage, and you look how it talks about the beauty of an inner spirit, the idea of submit isn't giving up and giving in. The biblical idea of submit is give your best. Give your best to your husbands who don't believe, and maybe they will believe. Give your best. Always be seeking, and all Christians are supposed to submit to one another. This little section is going to apply to single people as well, and maybe you'll be single for the rest of your life. Paul was single, Jesus was single. In the early church, the single people were varsity, and the married people were JV. That's how Jesus and Paul were. So don't feel bad if you're going to be single. But this applies to all of us. Submitting is just giving your best, loving one another, serving one another, putting your heart into the way you love each other. And I think this is a game changer, because these are pagan men who are not going to be serving their wives, right? They're not going to be giving their best to their wives. They're pagan Roman men. But this is so liberating for your marriage. This is liberating for your workplace. This is liberating for all your relationships with your extended family. This is just a powerful concept, and that's this. When someone is doing something wrong, you still have the ability and the responsibility to do what's right. You don't have to base your behavior on other people's behavior. What I'm asking you is this: in your workplace, in your friendships, in your relationship with your mom, in your relationship with your dad, in your relationship with your spouse, who controls your temperature? Does the other person have the hand on your thermostat? They're mad, so I'm mad. They get angry, so I get angry. They're upset, so I'm upset. They're cussing, so I'm cussing. They're just turning your dial. But if you have God's grace inside of you, if you have Jesus controlling you, it gives you agency. They don't control you. They're not deciding the condition of your inner spirit. Your inner spirit can be calm. Your inner spirit can be serene. The Bible tells this passage tells women to be quiet, but actually the Bible in the New Testament tells all Christians to be quiet. And I think what the Bible is saying is that God wants our spirit to be like a serene and calm lake, not like a hurricane. And rather than basing your behavior on the other person's behavior, you can base your behavior on Christ's behavior towards you. And that's how you actually can be a leader, even when you're at the bottom of the Roman hierarchy beast. When you're in the belly of the beast, you can still be the leader. Verse 3, and another maybe kind of tricky verse. Your beauty should not come from outward adornment, such as elaborate hairstyles and the wearing of gold jewelry or fine clothes. Rather, it should be your inner self, unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is great worth in God's sight. Some of you are like, I actually was with somebody last night. They're like, yeah, my niece is getting a 6-hour weave. I'm like, dang, this verse, what's up, Peter? What's going on here? Like, 6-hour weave? I can't even sit still for a 20-minute haircut. But what is this about the outward adornment and hairstyles and gold jewelry? Peter is not forbidding outward beauty. He's dethroning it. He's dethroning outward beauty. And I think this is so significant Because social media, I mean, it's like cigarettes and cancer. It has been proven that social media increases anxiety and depression. But it's been worse for teenage girls. You know, there were documents that came out from Meta showing that when a teenage girl deletes a selfie, that's when they target her with beauty ads. When she's feeling bad about herself, when she's feeling insecure about herself, beauty ads, beauty ads, beauty ads. There's been documents from Meta about that. Suicide attempts among teenage girls in particular have skyrocketed since the invention of Instagram, since the invention of TikTok. Peter is dethroning beauty. Check out this quote by Cara Delevingne. Cara Delevingne, she's an actress, she's a model, very, very beautiful young lady. She says, we're told that if we're beautiful, if we're skinny, if we're successful or famous, if we fit in, if everyone loves us, then we'll be happy. But that's not true. Modeling was killing my soul. Man, Peter's not forbidding beauty, he's dethroning it. And our culture is destructive with its idolization of beauty. But as we close in towards the end of this, I want to put verse 7 up there. We close in here. I know it's been a lot to cover, and I honestly, like I said, there's a million ghosts and spirits. This could be like just go on and on and on and on all day. But I want to put verse 7 up here. He says, heirs with you in the grace of life. In Roman culture, there was something called the lex voconia, okay? The lex voconia. And want to know what that meant? It meant women couldn't inherit anything. Women couldn't inherit any property. But Peter writes and he says, guess what? How does he start the letter? If you read 1 Peter 1, he's saying, she's an heir with you. You have, he says in chapter 1, you have an inheritance which doesn't perish, spoil, or fade, which is of more value than silver or gold. It's an inheritance that was purchased with the precious blood of Christ. What this is saying to you women is that your value is not determined by whether or not some man likes you. Your value for all of us isn't determined by what's on your business card or what's on your paycheck. Your value is not determined by what house you live in, how much money you have, what's your net worth, what you've accomplished, how many Instagram followers you have, where you've traveled, what you own, how you dress. You have infinite value. And want to know what the gospel did? I'll show you what the gospel did. I talked to you about patria potestas. Look what Christians did in 374. 60 years after Christianity was legalized, that's the Edict of Milan, Christians made patria potestas illegal after 1,000 years of abusing women. Executing your wife was legal under patria potestas, but what's one of the first things Christians do when they become dominant in the Roman Empire in the 300s? They banish it. Jesus loves women. Jesus elevates women. Jesus changed the world. And I just want you to know that your worth is based on the blood of God.